Well, speaking of taking advantage of young children,
Well, that's a hell of
well,
a segue that I think we should always avoid.
no, but yeah. So Republicans in a bunch of states like Iowa and there's a bunch, Arkansas. They're trying to. Okay, so there's a labor shortage right now in the country. So we could open up the borders and allow more immigrants. We had that whole thing with Florida where they passed more laws against immigration. And what happened? Nobody showed up to work. Like 20% of their workers just vanished overnight because they were all immigrants. Um, we could do that. That would be one thing. We could, I don't know, throw more money into education so these people have more job training and skills and they can get better jobs. That would be like a vote on me. But the easier, better solution the Republicans have found is, you know what? Why aren't these 14, 15, and 16 and 17-year-olds working? Let's roll back child labor laws and get kids working again. And here's
Let's just have them running like big machines in factories again, and that's a great idea.
it's a phenomenal idea, and that's Anna Kasparian is going to talk about it right here. Let's see if I got this. Um, right here. Here we go. This is Anna Kasparian with the Young Turks.
Across the country have begun rolling back child labor protections because, of course, you have corporations that really need more labor that they can exploit and pay as little as possible. Children are perfect for that. Now, Iowa is one of those states, and thanks to the work of More Perfect Union, we now have restaurant groups and other businesses in need. We know about the restaurant groups and other businesses looking for cheap labor and how they fueled the efforts by state lawmakers to propose this bill and potentially pass it. So before we get to the industries behind the bill, the money behind the bill, why don't we tell you what the bill actually does? Again, this is in the state of Iowa. It was sponsored by a Republican state senator by the name of Jason Schultz. Let's watch.
The next part of the bill was clearly written for the Iowa Restaurant Association, Hotel and Lodging Association, and National Bureau of Independent Businesses, the state leaders in low-wage jobs. It would allow 14-year-olds to work in giant freezing meat lockers and raise their mandatory clock-out time from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. and then 11 p.m. in the summer.
The research that has been done has found pretty clearly that 20 hours is kind of a cutoff, and when kids work more than that during the school week, the grades start to plummet, and their school completion rate starts to plummet.
That's not even a joke. Kids who work more than 20 hours a week, much more likely not to finish high school.
Well, as a high school teacher, see, I can have it as a something too. Incredible here. So, as a high school teacher, I can tell you, I teach 10th graders,
right?
And sometimes 11th graders, mostly the 10th graders though. And that's when you're 16. It's kind of the age where you just start getting jobs sometimes. And I can see a huge difference when students start getting jobs. I start noticing late to school more, missing morning classes more, falling asleep in class more work not getting turned in. And I don't have the data on how many hours per week, but that's just becoming employed at all. So you go knocking those ages lower and increasing the number of hours, and I don't see positive trends coming out of that. I only see it exacerbating something that's already somewhat problematic where education is concerned.
Well, and then having kids, like I said, you can do meat lockers and working in different temperatures. Then on top of the fact, we're going to push it back to where, now you're 14, we can work you till 11 o'clock at night. Or fire you. Right? Well, 11 o'clock at night, that kid's got to get up and be at school at 7:30 in the morning. That's not enough time.
It looked like they were only saying 11 o'clock at night was a summertime thing.
Well, it was a summertime thing, but still, I mean, how many of those kids are going to probably be in summer school because they were barely keeping it up during the year? right?
That's true. Smart school is a real thing, so some of them probably really do still have school.
Yeah, so it's just one of those things where it's just a drag. I think it's just horrible. And then like we talked about a little bit earlier about this subject of 14. They're talking about in some of these states you could be 14 and working at a bar, and we were talking. Oh, let's have a. Can you imagine going to a bar and your bartender's a 14-year-old girl?
Okay, first of all, I do not want a 14-year-old pouring me drinks. It
No,
creeps me out.
I don't want a 14-year-old in the freaking building.
Yeah, well, okay, it creeps me out. I don't think I'm not trying to be judgmental about the skill of a 14-year-old, but I don't know that I think they're going to do a really great job, and I really don't want them thinking it's a great idea to, just add the juice for color to a cocktail or whatever. I think that's a terrible idea. Somebody who can't even ever have a drink themselves shouldn't be mixing mine.
Well, I don't think.
Furthermore, a bunch of drunk adults don't need to be sitting there with teenagers interacting with them in those moments. That's a recipe for all sorts of problems.
Oh, the sexual.
Where a bar fight breaks up, what the hell's a 14-year-old gonna do?
Yeah.
There's so many disasters waiting to happen.
Oh, sexual assault is definitely like on the list of that one for sure. I can foresee that. I've been to bars before with drunk guys, and it's like you have a 14-year-old girl. She's basically a target at that point.
Could very easily become a victim.
14-year-old boy at certain bars is a target. I mean, it's just
absolutely.
So here's some of the lawmakers. So Madison, Wisconsin was one of them. Then we're trying to let children work more hazardous occupations, longer hours and nights. Expanded rules including serving alcohol in bars and restaurants as young as 14. Roll back labor rules. A ton of Republican lawmakers are doing this. This is actually from a think tank in Florida. Came up with a lot of this stuff. And this is to try and help the job shortage. And it's like, all right. But like everybody else, it's like child labor. I mean, there's a reason we have child labor laws in this country because children have been exploited for a long time up until we did that. Until the unions got those, right? Especially teen workers. Let's see. 10 states over the past 2 years. Let's see. Wisconsin, Ohio, Iowa currently. Driving up. Let's see. Employers have struggled to fill open positions after a spike in retirements, death and illness. Bringing more children to the labor market is, of course, not the only way to solve the problem. Economists, as we brought up earlier, point to several of the strategies the country can employ. The most obvious is encouraging immigration. Ooh, heaven forbid. The whole country is built on immigrants. I don't know why we don't get more, right? But it's politically divisive because a lot of those immigrants are not white. Let's see. But yeah, that's how we've done it for years. Wisconsin lawmakers are backing a proposal to allow 14-year-olds to serve alcohol in bars and restaurants. If passed, Wisconsin would have the lowest such limit nationwide, according to the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. Yeah, that sounds good. Arkansas, Huckabee Sanders signed a law in March eliminating permits that require employers to verify a child's age and their parents' consent. Wow, I didn't see that. But
14-year-old bartender. I mean, aren't you also sort of promoting teenage drinking on top of it in like a sideways way? You might not be saying it, but I have to say, you work in a restaurant or a bar and you get like a shift meal, a shift drink. Like these are things that you get.
Right.
And while somebody underage is not supposed to do that, you can't tell me that's not going to end up happening.
Well, that was my point. That was my point with the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. I mean, they're weighing in, going, "This is not good. You can't have children in that, right?" It's one thing. I mean, like if you want to argue, like people in Europe, where it's like, okay, you can drink when you're 16 in some countries or 18, but it's like, yeah, but they're having a glass of wine with their parents at dinner. This is not a kid by themselves in a bar serving. It's a different
liquor at that.
Yeah, it's a different scenario here.
I mean, how often have you been in a bar where the bartenders take shots with the clientele and whatnot? I mean, I'm even sometimes a little unsure of whether I think that's a good idea on adults, but let alone suddenly the line becomes super blurred because you've got 14-year-olds that get to do these jobs. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's a recipe for alcoholism, you know, getting hurt in friggin' bar fights, being, you know, sexual misconduct being directed toward children, you know, all sorts of issues.
Well, here, let's see. Like I said, Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I don't know if you remember her. She used to be the White House speaker correspondent for the president, Trump. Her big bill in Arkansas, she's the governor there now, eliminated permits that required employers to verify the child's age and the parents' consent. So I can hire a child without the parents' consent, without any validation or permit or anything. Oh man, it's just, yeah, the children now working in these jobs that frankly, they should be in school.
I agree.
You know, argue with me all you
And
want.
unfortunately, sometimes what happens is teenagers start getting a taste of money and they stop being interested in school at all because they're like, I'm making good money. What do I need this for? I'm not saying that's going to be all, but there's an extra danger there too, educationally, not just in falling behind because you're too tired and all of that, but there's also, you know, sometimes the teenagers start seeing good money, all that tip money, and then they can start working, you know, these different kinds of jobs. They start looking at their education like it's maybe less important.
Right, and don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that, but I've seen that trap. And, you know, not so much I had a lot of friends that dropped out of high school. I know people that did because they got decent jobs and they're like, well, I'm doing better than you. I'm making more money than you. And it's like, yeah, but where are you going to be 5 years from now? You don't really have any skills or education to advance. You're stuck in that position unless you go into business for yourself and you happen to be one of the, 10% that's successful. And even then, 10% that's successful just means they make money, right? Doesn't mean they're making a lot of money. And then, like when I was in college, I had that. I mean, I worked retail, and you know, you didn't get tips or anything. I didn't make a ton of money, but I had full benefits, right? And it was enough to pay my bills for the most part at the time. I did that, and sometimes I worked as a janitor, but doing those jobs, I had friends that worked in restaurants and like, well, I'm making this in tips and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really want to get stuck into that because then you get stuck into that kind of nightlife with those people. Right. And almost everybody I knew who worked at a bar or restaurant dropped out of college. Because the money was good and they were like, oh, I'm making great in tips and blah, blah, blah. And then you run into them 10 years later and they're still doing the exact same thing. And they're shocked that you actually finished and have the career. And it's like, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's, you know, if they like doing their job, but I see getting stuck into that where it's tempting to get into that trap and that lifestyle. So no, you made a good point. I think when you're talking, especially about young kids, they sit there and they, like you said, they only see the immediate paycheck. They don't see the long-term ramifications.
Right. They see the dollar signs right now.
Right.
And they don't have really a long view of that, their future, or even what that looks like when you have an adult set of bills.
Right. Yeah, they don't have a long-term plan. It's just short-term stuff. So anyway, still horrible that